Welcome back to our continuing special coverage of the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump. And yes, if you're wondering, it's still cold, but we'll just call it bracing. The focus today has been on Washington, of course, the site of inauguration festivities. But large cities across our country are bracing for the arrest of illegal or undocumented immigrants targeted by federal immigration authorities for being here without proper authorization. The cities most concerned about this are so-called sanctuary jurisdictions. That's where under city ordinances, there are limits on the cooperation those city officials can provide to federal immigration officers. One of the locations expected to be targeted by deportation teams is Chicago, and that's where we find our Lilia Luciano. Lilia, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. How is Chicago's migrant community preparing for what they anticipate is coming in the days ahead?
Hey there, Major. I have been hearing today from undocumented immigrants, from families, from advocates, from attorneys. And basically what's happening is that there's sharing of information. There are these campaigns of Know Your Rights. One of the things that the advocates have been telling us today is they're making sure that people know that they, even if they are undocumented, they have rights. And one of the most important things for them to do to protect themselves and their families from being separated in the case that these wide raids or sweeps happen is to stay silent. This is what we're hearing from the advocates. Immigrants here tell us that a lot of people are not going to show up to work tomorrow because they don't want to take any chances, that people are truly scared. They've used the word panic. They feel that their families are at stake. People who have children who were born in the United States, who are U.S. citizens by birthright, which is one of those rights that we've heard that at some point President Trump might try to challenge, that they might separate, that they might be deported, and then their children would have to stay here, and they're figuring out how to avoid that from happening. That said, Major, what has been communicated by Tom Homan, the border czar, is that this is going to be a targeted operation. Over the weekend, and talking to several journalists, he has pushed back on the idea that Chicago should be the focus of these operations because he says that they will be carried out nationwide. These sweeps, they don't want to call them targeted. And I've talked to ICE about this because they're saying they are targeted, not sweeps, not raid, that they are focused on people who have committed crimes. That said, I have asked people in this community, look, this is what the border czar is saying, that he's going after people who are a national threat, who are a public safety threat. They don't believe that. They're saying everybody could be a target, especially in a sanctuary city where that information of who committed a crime could be out of ICE's hands.
Lilia Luciano, thank you so very much. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. General, thank you for your time. What are you bracing for from a legal perspective as the Attorney General of Illinois as you hear declarations from President Trump about immigration enforcement to come?
Well, as the previous speaker said, that Chicago has an ordinance that's a welcoming ordinance, but more importantly, the state of Illinois has what's called the Illinois Trust Act. It says no local or state law enforcement resources can be used for civil immigration enforcement. And so we're making sure that we put out guidance to law enforcement agencies throughout the state. There are hundreds of law enforcement agencies throughout the state to make certain that they know what the Illinois law is with regards to civil immigration enforcement. With regards to whether there's a federal criminal warrant, the same law enforcement can collaborate the same as they can for a citizen if a non-citizen is suspected of committing a crime.
Mr. Attorney General, the president said today he is going to seek to end birthright citizenship. Is that something your state would legally challenge?
Most certainly. The 14th Amendment is clear. I myself am a child of immigrants from Haiti, so I'm a birthright baby. The birthright citizenship has been challenged in the past and has been upheld by the Supreme Court. The language in the 14th Amendment is clear and unambiguous. If you're born in this country, you're a citizen of this country.
When you listen to Lilia Luciano, my colleague, describe her conversations with the immigrant community in Chicago, and they use words like fear and panic. Has that been consistent with your conversations, Mr. Attorney General?
Most certainly. And we have to understand that's what these threats are meant to create, is that type of fear. And it's unfortunate because we have an economy that relies heavily on the labor of an immigrant population, taxpayers. And they have blended well into our community here in Chicago and throughout the country. And certainly we need to have secure borders, and we need to make sure that there's comprehensive immigration reform, but we don't need to stoke fear.
And Mr. Attorney General, when you also have conversations with your constituents in Illinois who say, well, isn't it common sense that if people are here illegally, especially if they've committed an offense, even if it's a small so-called minor offense, they should be deported because their first act was to enter the country illegally, and then they committed some manner of crime while they were here? Shouldn't they have to go?
Well, if there's evidence and credible evidence that anybody has committed a crime, and a federal agent can get a criminal warrant, and just as we would with a citizen, we would collaborate if there's a federal criminal warrant. What we don't want is we don't want this wide blanket just alleging credibly or sometimes not credibly that somebody is accused of a crime, and racial profiling can take place, families can be disrupted. I certainly don't stand in the way of credible law enforcement. I am a head of a law enforcement agency. I collaborate on an ongoing basis with federal law enforcement agencies as well as local and state law enforcement agencies, and will continue to do so. But I will not be, and nor will other law enforcement agencies be partaking in civil immigration enforcement.
Last question, Mr. Attorney General. We have a true clash of pardon issues today on this Inauguration Day here in Washington. Right before he left the presidency, President Biden preemptively pardoned members of his family. As you heard, you might have just heard, President Trump said he's going to go to the White House later this evening and pardon many, but we don't know exactly the exact number, many of those who have been found guilty or pled guilty to offenses related to January 6th. I'd like your reaction to that clash of the use of pardon power by the presidents.
Well, first of all, with regards to January 6th, the nation saw the criminal offenses that were taking place on January 6th. Those people are not worthy of a presidential pardon. Those were people attacking law enforcement officers. And so the notion that a first act would be to pardon such individuals that would commit such acts is unconscionable in my view. With regards to the preemptive pardons by our former president, it's an anticipation of abuse of law enforcement, federal law enforcement agencies, which I hope does not happen. I started my tenure as Attorney General when Trump was in his first term, and we collaborated with federal law enforcement agencies on a whole host of criminal enforcement items. And I hope to do so going forward, but I hope that power is not abused by the president.
Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.